200 years ago, this was a very important center for the young Talbot settlement. I'm here at the village of Burwell's Corners in southern Ontario. And today, there's not even a sign marking which village this is. But at its time, here was much more important than that little upstart, London, Ontario, at the forks of the Thames. And Burwell's Corners is named after one of this area's earliest and most unfortunate settlers. Marlon Burwell was the son of United Empire loyalists who came to the Talbot settlement in 1809. He was a surveyor, and that was fortunate, as Thomas Talbot had been put in charge of settling the area. And before any of that could happen, land had to be parceled out into lots and roads surveyed. And Burwell's Corners was to be center of the action. Surveying was an important job, and in early Upper Canada, there was a massive area that needed to be done. This little town had a post office, with Burwell acting as the first postmaster. He then started a small brickyard, and he did it all the while serving as a member of Parliament, so he was a very busy man. 2 sawmills located here, and a general store too. Oh, and a distillery. Colonel Talbot's love for liquor was mentioned by almost everyone who wrote about him. And when you consider that between what is now Windsor and Niagara Falls, there were very few settlements of any kind, well, this is practically metropolis in 1800s Upper Canada. So what about Burwell himself? He and his wife Sarah had 9 children, yet they seemed to be a family in crisis. During the War of 1812, he was captured by raiders from the United States, and his property burned to the ground. The Americans took him as a prisoner of war, and he ended up in Ohio for 4 months. But things got even worse. After the war, one of his young sons fell into a cauldron and was scalded to death, and Burwell sustained serious injuries trying to rescue the tot. After that, things became worse for the family. As the kids got older, the family feuds became legendary, and one son became notoriously rebellious. Yet Burwell accomplished a lot in one short lifetime. In addition to being a surveyor of much of what is now southern Ontario, and a brickmaker, and a postmaster, and a member of Parliament, maybe his most important accomplishment was setting up a registry office. Now, Talbot had just written names across parts of a map when he handed out land to settlers. And by all accounts, the records were in shambles when word got back to York, what is now Toronto. It's said that if Talbot was angry with one of his settlers, he would just erase the penciled name from the map. On more than one occasion, settlers fought their way through thick forests to find that someone else was already on the land that Talbot had promised to them. So getting that whole mess straightened out would be Burwell's biggest job. So what did his contemporaries think of this dynamo of a man? Well, when Burwell died in 1846, Thomas Talbot lamented that he was, quote, "my best helper and my best friend." But early settlers were often critical of the group that had been in charge of the Talbot settlement, and Burwell comes off in their estimation as being petty and not very bright. Yet we should take that with a grain of salt. This was a time when there was a lot of conflict over how Upper Canada was to be run. And right here is where Burwell's most important accomplishment stood, the registry office. This was more important than London or St. Thomas in its time because every new settler had to come here to get their land, to register their land, to start a new life here in the New World. It's so important that in 1924, on the 100th anniversary of the founding of the registry office, a bronze plaque was placed here. And about 15 years ago, it was pried off the concrete and stolen. Sadly, it's not been replaced. And that is kind of symbolic about how we treat our history. A village with no sign and a concrete marker with no plaque are what's left of one of the most important places in southern Ontario.